when we hear Jesus talking about this, he often will use the Pharisees of his day as a compare and a contrast to his followers. And I just find this so fascinating. If you read through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, you're going to hear throughout those Gospels Jesus constantly railing on these two groups of people, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, let's be clear. There were given in the Old Testament 536 laws. It is debatable because some groups will say, no, there's 25 extras, and some say, no, there's 13 less. And so, but it's over 500 for all the groups. That is a boatload of commands. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, many of them would claim absolute perfection in following all of those laws for their life. And they would say, oh yeah, absolute perfection, never broken one. I am holy. And their self-righteousness was evident. Were they doing what God the Father had asked them to do from the Old Testament? The answer is yes. They weren't supposed to be disobedient because God had clearly marked out all the boundaries and said, hey, everything inside of this, you get to play, have fun. Just don't go outside of it because it's not good for you. Trust me. But we get to play it here. And so they were playing it here and all that was good. But Jesus continually says a certain phrase about the Pharisees, and he says it to his disciples. We find this clearly in Matthew chapter 23. This is what Jesus said. He says, don't be like them. What do you mean? What are you talking about? They're perfect in following all the commands that the Father gave. What do you mean you don't want me to be like them? I thought you wanted me to be like them. Don't you want me to follow those commands? Jesus wasn't saying don't follow those commands. He's saying don't be like them. Like them is a statement of being. He didn't say don't do what they do. He says don't be like them. The difference is really actually clear. It's the difference between what I do, they were perfect, and who I am. Jesus said, who these people are, I'll describe it. He said, I'll tell you what they are. They are a whitewashed sepulcher. They are a whitewashed grave. They look amazing on the outside, freshly painted, all the cobwebs taken away. There's no dirt in any of the corners. They are so pristine from top to bottom. They look amazing. But on the inside of that are rotten bones. So I'm telling you, my disciples, don't be like them. I want you to live a different vision every single day. Before I can do anything for others, I have to settle who I'm going to be myself. And guys, this is where we're at. It's about who I am today. It's the why. It's the why of my life. Before I ever get to the what, I need to get to the why, the root. Why do I do what I do? Jesus said in John 15:4, he said, remain in me, and I will remain in you. A branch can't produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you can't be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I'm the vine, you're the branches, and those who remain in me, and I in them, will produce much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Did he say you can do some things? Did he say you can do most of it? He said you can do nothing because the Pharisees were doing all of it. But it didn't matter to Jesus because their hearts were rotten. So the what didn't actually matter until the why was taken care of. And that is a posture of the heart issue. So here's the challenge that I think is in front of us as I would read Isaiah's words, I am like a sharp arrow in his quiver. I wonder if we would have that same declaration in our own heart, that eruption in our own heart where we would realize, oh my word, I'm going back to my family, whether it's one person that lives in your home, whether it's 10, or whether you're an empty nester, but you still recognize why you're in this family group that you have. And you would declare, I got it. I'm like a sharp arrow that is in his quiver, and when he sends me, he wants me to land the mark. So when I'm getting into these relationships, when I'm with them, I know why I'm there. And tomorrow when I go to work, I know why I'm there. And next year, throughout this year, I'm going to meet different people. And they're going to come into my life. I'm going to say, God, what's this all about? And he's going to say, you're there to land the mark, to be useful in my hands. But the question comes down to the challenge we all need to ask ourselves, which is, do I want God's vision for me? God's grander vision is going to be accomplished whether you do it or not. God's grander vision is going to be accomplished whether I do it or not. But you and I are the vision within the grander vision, and that's in our hands. To cooperate with God, to work with Him, to see that vision to come to fruition. And the question is, do I want the vision? Isaiah said, I can see it. I am clear as a bell on my vision, the vision for my life, and I want it. Truthfully, that's not a question that all of us have answered. Or maybe we did 10 years ago, 3 years ago, and we find ourselves here today realizing, I'm not sure that I actually have the answer to that. If you look at my life, you look at the condition of my heart, I don't think that I could actually answer that with any real clarity. Well, the question comes down, will I actually declare this? And it's about the posturing of my heart, which is so crucial to see the vision within the vision, the grander vision, accomplished. Recently, we had a number of ladies who shared their stories of the vision of their life being realized and seeing how God would work it out in them. One of those girls' names, young lady, her name is Sarah. And I have permission to share this story. This was put together by our women's ministry here. Pastor Cheryl, she encouraged these ladies to do this, and some of these stories were shared with a larger group of ladies in December, but I wanted to share this. Now, I thought about maybe sharing bits and pieces of 2 or 3 stories, but I thought, you know what, I'm not, because I read Sarah's story, and I said, this is absolutely just perfect. So bear with me, it's going to be about 4 minutes, but I think you're going to see why. Self-sufficient. That would easily sum up how I lived my life. I was self-sufficient, an independent woman who strived to be in control at all times. I learned early on that I couldn't rely on others and that weaknesses would be preyed upon. The lack of security and mistrust bred control out of necessity. I knew I could always count on myself, so if anything was going to happen, it'd be up to me to figure it out, and don't even think about asking for help. In today's society, independence is synonymous with success. We're constantly bombarded with examples of people who took control of their destiny and ended up on top. When you picture any woman of influence, it's made to seem as though she got there alone. Without being taught another way to live, this was validation that I needed, and it solidified my belief that I was solely responsible for how my life turned out. And my identity became wrapped up in my productivity and my accomplishments. I never wanted people to see my imperfections because I felt that made me lesser of a person. There was a shame that I felt in not being perfect. I worked hard to curate an image of a girl who was bulletproof. Now, I know none of you resonate with this story whatsoever. You have no idea what she's talking about. So I appreciate you bearing with me while I read this. But yeah, I just thought it'd be interesting for somebody, probably not even here today, that might watch this by video. I apologize for being so practical. As it turned out, the more I tried to control everything and the harder I strived to add to my resume, the greater my anxiety became. There was always another rung on the ladder to climb, and I couldn't afford to rest. If I wasn't achieving, was I worth anything? This belief system led me to more worry and depression. I added more and more onto my plate, trying to escape the feelings of not being enough. And if I kept myself busy, I wouldn't have time to sit with the emptiness that consumed me. I isolated myself because I didn't know how to be vulnerable and ask for help. The spiral of anxiety was powerful, and it had a clenched grip on my life. I looked great, and I smelled great on the outside. I love that line. It's just funny. But I was riddled with insecurity and panic under the surface. There was something missing. this was a hole that I'd been trying to, in vain, to fill with material things and accolades, but it wasn't working. And as a girl who grew up in my church, having a relationship with Jesus was a foreign concept. While I believed in him, my picture was of a distant God who just watched his people from afar. He was there, but not accessible. I really didn't know what it meant to be created in his image or have a trusting father-daughter relationship with him. Without a father figure of my own, I couldn't even imagine God like that. An amazing, godly woman in my life encouraged me to rekindle my faith. I began to understand the true nature of God and that my identity was rooted in him and what he said about me. I can't recall the exact turning point, but there was a series of moments in which Jesus began nudging me to let go of my need to control everything. He showed me that I could put all things in his hands. He showed me that accomplishments didn't determine my value. My value came from being his daughter, period. It was a slow process, but I relinquished my identity of independence and self-sufficiency. I found freedom in relying on Jesus and his plan for my life. I noticed that the closer I moved towards God and trusted in him, the less anxiety I had. The burden of having to figure it all out was lifted. The burden of perfectionism was replaced with peace in knowing who and whose I am. The hole in my heart was filled when I unwrapped the gift of my identity in him and am forever changed. 2 Timothy 1:7, God has not given me a spirit of fear, but a power of love and of a sound mind. That's somebody who's living the vision today. Go, Sarah. She had tears in her eyes when she was telling me after the first service what a joy it was that she got to have that read and shared, because she knows that that could be a great encouragement to many. When we look at our life and really where we're at today and dealing with this issue of the heart, which is really the underlying what or why to the what, before we get to the what, which the rest of the series will help deal with and work out this arrow project that is each of our lives, the why is the most important question for us today. Because we can do a lot of what's in our life, but as Jesus pointed out, don't be like them. The difference is that the followers of Jesus had given him their hearts. The Pharisees didn't. This is really the simplicity of the gospel.